Hey, welcome to the OCA monthly meeting. We're glad you're here with us tonight. It's always a privilege to be a part of this group and with everyone online and with Lou and our special guest, Rich. He's going to be talking about angelfish, and Lou will talk more about that in introducing him. But our president, Lou, has some really cool announcements he wants to give us as to what is happening at the OCA and what we can look forward to and be excited about in the midst of what sometimes seems like setbacks, but this actually is a positive thing in which we get to do new things that we've never done before. So we're really appreciative of Lou and everything that he's doing. And we just love to hear from him here in the next few minutes as to what's coming up.
All right, buddy. Yeah, we're working on this online extravaganza. It's going to be the same weekend as the normal extravaganza. As Byron said, we're working on stuff that, as far as we know, no one's ever done before. So we have to work through it slowly. And I don't have quite as much as I'd like to announce tonight, simply because we got to work out some kinks and want to make sure we're sure of what we're talking about and not just, slinging promises. It's going to be basically, it's probably going to be the 2 nights. There'll be 3 different broadcasts. One will be Friday night, one Saturday night, and one Sunday afternoon. There'll be a speaker for each one. The Sunday one will be longer. It'll be doing some other things, some announcements, and including the Jim Smith Award, the Jim Smith Grant winner, which we're going to be doing that. That's nothing stopping us there. We will have more to announce at the September meeting. We'll have, hopefully we'll be able to roll out everything that we're going to do by then and let you know what to expect. Let's see, on another front, a couple of our board members, John B. Dietrich and Ron Michael, have put together the virtual BAP system that had just started a couple weeks ago. There's details on our website, Facebook group. The first announcement you see on there tells you how to enter it. For this this month, it's most of those turned in are by John B. and Ron, but they're the ones that had to work out all the kinks. So that way they can make sure that what they're asking you to do is something easy enough for everybody to do. And they wanted me to announce what was turned in. So we have a few things. John B. turned in a Statotilapia latifasciata, the zebra obliquidens. He turned in a Lanicara maylandi, which is a sulfurhead peacock. Amatitlania septum fasciata. Coptodon cote, which is a substrate spawning tilapia type. Copatochromis chrysonotus, Amatitlania nigrofasciatus, marbled convict, and Pseudotropheus whitetail ACI. Ron turned in a few. He turned in the Coptodon cote and Cynotilapia zebroidus from Cobway, which is the old favorite orangeback afras. And Julitochromis marleri, and Roger Stark, just to prove that there was enough time to get this done if you had wanted to, even if you weren't one of the people that planned it. Roger turned in Amatitlania nigrofasciatus black convicts, Nimbochromis venustus, and Pseudotropheus whitetail ACI. And I could see one thing I forgot to tell you about the extravaganza, the speakers. You might know him just in case you don't. We have Ad Koning is going to do one of the shows, updating us on his Tanganyika studies. Jeff Cardwell, who gives excellent talks on a recent trip to Colombia, and Håkon Hagensen from Norway, who is a pretty big name in the European hobby, new here. We'll talk about recent lure carried imports. So there we go, a little trip back to the extravaganza information there. So upcoming programs, we're going to be doing this live again in September. On September 4th, we'll have Michael Liu from the New England Cichlid Association talking about rare and unusual African cichlids. They get a lot of cool stuff over there, so you're going to see a lot of stuff you've never seen before, unless you've been following their Facebook group. Then a local guy, Nick Zarlinga from the Cleveland Zoo, is going to be talking about Project Piaba, which is a really cool thing they got going on in Brazil, a way to get wild fish into the hobby and protect the environment at the same time. You'll have to hear how this works because it's pretty fascinating. And in November, we got John Crepper coming to talk about feather fins. Tonight, we have someone that, as you're looking at him and you're saying, I know that guy. Well, it's because he's been at the extravaganzas, and you probably have been also. And that's where you know him from, Rich Bierbower. And you've also seen his angels in our auctions a lot, too. And you're going to be hearing a lot more about them and seeing how they were bred and how he raises them to look so good. So here is Rich Bierbower.
Thank you, Lou. And first off, I'd just like to thank everyone for inviting me to come present. Hopefully you pick up on something, and feel free if you have questions, send them our way, and I will do my best to answer this. Let me get my screen shared. Okay. So the ultimate goal tonight is to just go through how I raised my angelfish, and ultimately like the basic care and needs of angelfish. They're definitely one of the more common species that you're going to come across, whether you're at a pet shop or an auction. I don't think you'll go too many of those types of places that you won't see some version of angelfish showing up there. My focus, as you can see from the pictures that I go through here, obviously is going to be with the orange koi. They're something that I've kept ever since I started really getting into fish, but I certainly do have some other diverse interests when it comes to what I keep in my aquariums. But angelfish are certainly the ones that I have taken the most liking to. They belong to the Pterophyllum genus, and I put SP for species here because our domestic ones really don't necessarily belong to one, as I'll mention here in a little bit. So a little bit about my journey as far as getting into the aquarium trade. Really since I was a very small kid, so kindergarten or maybe even before that, I can't remember back exactly when I first started, but we had a few family aquariums, and I always was mostly focused on platies. And right now I don't have any platies, but it's pretty common to have some platies of some sort or the other hanging out in my fish room. But other than that, really didn't get into anything serious. I did meet a guy by the name of Jeff Blaisdell, who lives in Bradford, right close to where I grew up. And he actually was the first fish room that I ever saw. And he was really big into raising angelfish, which is how we met him. And that was kind of where, the extent of everything that I knew of the fish world kind of ended because I got to high school, and well, there was more important things in high school. And college, I started to get back into things a little bit. I was doing some stuff with a professor that does research in cichlids at Slippery Rock University, and the lovely firemouse cichlids. And from there, I got another tank, and that's kind of about as much as I can handle until I got out of grad school. And then my brother and I ended up both getting jobs close to home, and then we set up a fish room together with about 40 tanks. And eventually I got my own, bought my house, and with my wife, we set up what I have today, which has expanded a little bit, but we're up to around 2,500 gallons, which is about 52 tanks from 125 gallons down to 15 gallons, the smallest tanks that I run. And we've been doing that here for about the past 10 years, the way it is now. Okay, as far as our focus here, so with Bierbower Aquatics, my goal primarily is to raise top quality orange koi angelfish. They are definitely the ones that take up most of the tank space in my fish room as you walk around in there. The original koi that I got did come primarily from Dave Lasnik out of Olean, New York, as well as Steve Rybicki at Angels Plus. And I also got a group of fish from Mario Tormanovich out of Illinois, who, when I bred all across those lines all together, I got the fish that I call my own. And they've had a few other things worked into them, but those are essentially my koi line at this point. I suppose if I've kept them for 10 years, they definitely are something more unique to me. In addition to that, we do keep a variety of other fish here. A couple different colors of angelfish, but it's kind of hard for me to fit too many different colors in there. Albinos, I've had those for a long time, a personal favorite. And the orange marbles, as you'll see some pictures here, something new that I kind of developed here, at least my version of orange marble, which is a pretty flashy fish that definitely is something I'll be putting a lot more out of my fish room here in the upcoming years. Then Corydoras, I've always bred a couple different species of those. I love my live bears, wild types, as well as guppies. So there's usually always going to be a guppy or two down there. Bristlenose are another favorite. Longfin super reds are one that I was, as far as I could tell, one of the first people to hit the markets with these. I bred those using regular super reds with longfin red marbles. And I keep a few Africans usually and a few of the South American cichlids, depending on the time we go. So as far as how we are able to produce the fish that we do, so most people generally, from what I gather, like to see the fish that we bring to the auctions and such. And it doesn't happen by mistake. Going through biology and chemistry programs, I learned pretty early on that before you get into anything, you need to do plenty of research. And certainly I read every single thing out there that I can on how to raise the fish that I get, as well as best materials and products that help you do that in a successful way. The other big thing is starting with quality stock. When I'm looking for any type of fish, whether it's angels to bring some new blood into my lines or whatever, it's not that it's more expensive to buy the good stuff. It's worth it in the end because you're going to have a better fish when you get all finished up with it. So not cutting corners and just getting the lower end stuff, it's worth it. If you're going to stick with them for a while, you want to make sure you get them from a reputable source, as well as something that's nice and healthy and got all the traits you want. Consistency, regular care, maintenance. So, it's every single day, and I'm down in my fish room for a good while. Drives my wife nuts sometimes, but vacations are tricky. But luckily, I do have a good helper that comes over and I trust to go into my fish room. There's only one other person besides my wife and I, and that's my dad, who worked with us a lot, and he's close enough by that if we do go away, then that works out. So basic maintenance, I try to get my tanks. I clean about every week. If I do more than that, I run into some problems just because my water is so soft here. I have spring water. And other than that, just no overfeeding, just keeping filters running properly. And that's really going to be the best thing to keep your fish looking good. As far as filters, I'll talk more about that in a little bit here, but not cutting corners there. So I use all sponge filters of various types, and those I find to be the best to raise large numbers of fish. From there, food, preventative treatments. Certainly, I do a really unique blend of flake food that I mix a lot of different varieties, but certainly color flake is needed for the koi. But again, don't cut corners on products just because it's cheap. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the best. Preventative treatments. So there's lots of these easily available today, from dewormers to various other treatments that you definitely want to hit fish with, and as well as doing some good quarantine for anything new coming into your aquariums if you can. Beyond that, one of the people that I learned a lot from in the aquarium trade made the statement that for every one great achievement you have with aquariums, you're usually going to have 10 disappointments. And if anybody gets started in this, it takes a long time. It's not easy. Especially every species has got its nuances. So you really have to certainly learn as you move along. And with that, keep track of what works and don't repeat your mistakes over and over again. But as long as you're still having fun, then it's all worth it. So a little bit of background on the freshwater angelfish. They are a New World cichlid, primarily down in South America, at least natively. Throughout the Amazon basin, there's not too many places that you're not going to come across some species of angelfish or the other. There are generally three recognized wild species, and depending on which books you go to, you might see some other ones show up. The three primary ones, though, that you're going to come across in any of the importers are going to be Scalare, which is really the basis for what the domesticated angelfish is probably from, most of it anyways. Their genetics could probably be traced back to scalare. And then altums, which are gorgeous big fish. I've actually never kept those. One of the fish that are on my list, but they, I don't know, I guess just haven't found their way to me yet. And Leopoldi are also kind of called a long nose angelfish. They have a little bit different body shape to them, a little smaller of an angel. But really, I mean, you're cutting hairs with some of these when you get them. And the other thing is with the wild angels, every tributary within the Amazon River basin has a slight variation. I mean, just like we see with the Corydorus and plecos and a lot of the other fish that we're familiar with, each of these little tributaries is ultimately an isolated environment. And they do have slight genetic differences, whether it's behavioral or colors. A handful of years back, I picked up some really nice Peruvian scalare angels. And the reason I chose those ones specifically is that area of the Amazon, the angels are known for having a lot of red coloration to them. And that was something that I really wanted to have worked into my fish. So it worked out great. They went, I've managed to get them pair up with a koi angel, and all of my koi that I have just, a few years ago, picked up a nice dose of wild Peruvian. Now, it took me about 3 generations to really start getting koi. I mean, I had a lot of other colors come out there for a while with silvers and such, but certainly something that I highly recommend. But with that said, I mean, I'm sure if we really did a lot of genetic analysis with the angelfish, you would find there's probably more species than just those 3, but they are closely related. So breeding together and stuff, but I mean, being the biologist in me, just because they can reproduce together doesn't mean that they are actually the same species, which we also see with many of our African cichlids as well. Behaviorally in the wild and stuff, they probably would never breed together, but in captivity, things are a whole different ballgame for them. So our domesticated angelfish, and these are some of my earlier orange marbles that I had here. The ones that I'm selling now, orange goes all the way down through the body. But we generally refer to them as Pterophyllum scalare, but I would prefer Pterophyllum species because it's probably not likely that they're only scalare at this point in time. As far as where they all came from, I mean, angelfish have been in the trade for a long time. And there's been many different importations, so who knows which tributaries they all came from. So at this best case scenario, they're just a blending of a lot of different angels, depending on which were bred together at various points in time. Okay, there are a slew of colors. All of these, the actual wild type angels are the silvers that I had up here. So that's a wild Peruvian scalare angel. That's what they look like when they come out of the Amazon. But we have selected for various mutations that have shown up in captivity. And once you start line breeding and crossing those and selecting for those traits, you got all kinds of different colors. These are just some of the colors that show up out there. If you want to see a more exhaustive list, certainly going to a few of the websites like angelfish.org, they will have a better listing. And there's within each of these colors, there's a lot of variations with them as well. Like I put blue varieties. There is a ton of blues. I've never really gotten into the blue angels a lot, but they have a lot of little subcategories and that kind of overlap with many of these. So a lot of little categories that I don't really have time to go through tonight, or else we'd be here till midnight probably. But in the pictures, some of the ones I keep. So these are my orange marbles, which are a lot like koi's, except they're that dark marble background, black lace. These guys are actually half wild Peruvian as well. And then a double dark black here. And I'm one of my younger orange koi. But out of these, the only ones I keep around are obviously the blacks, the orange marbles, koi's, and then I have albino angels and some smoky types. And again, with the smokies, you have a couple different varieties within there. So there's a lot of different colors out there. So you could set up a tank just with different colored angels and have a pretty nice show going on if you were able to round up one or so of each of these colors. You can certainly set up a nice display tank with them. Okay. In addition to color, there's a couple other small traits that exist within the angelfish. Fin type is one that's pretty easy to plan for when you're setting up breeding pairs and such. This male that's in the front here is one of my standard fin. Now, some standard fin angels do have longer fins than others. Just depends on the line and everything. So there's also some wide fin ones and things of that nature. But the typical standard fin, the fins are about as long as what the body is wide, not much more than that. The veil fin, and the fish on my right-hand side here, is a single dose of veil. So it is, this particular trait is what's called partial dominance, where you or incomplete dominance, where you have one dose of the gene will make it be an intermediate trait. So the veil fin angels have a much taller, kind of narrower fin. The trade-off, though, is their bodies tend to be a little smaller than standard fin. So with the koi, personally, this is my favorite. Like the regular veil fin is my favorite fin type, because it's kind of a nice, they have the big, beautiful fins, and they have a decent sized body. Now, if they get a double dose, and I didn't even have one of these in my fish room to take a picture of, but if you have a double dose of the veil fin, they end up getting what's called a super veil. And the fins are much longer. They tend to flow over backwards. The fish kind of have a little bit harder time swimming. Kind of like a fancy guppy, I guess, is one way to look at it. The fins are just very, very large and elongated. And because of that, they their bodies, again, are a little bit smaller. They're just not my favorite. Some people love them. It just depends on your favorite, what you prefer. When I set my pairs up, I breed typically a standard to a veil, and I get half standard fin, half veil fin. I don't get any super veils with that cross, and that's my preferred one throughout my fish room. Okay, as far as other genetics, there is a whole host of these that you can look at. Again, this would take us a long time to go through, and it's not something that I feel most people really get into. If you are interested in looking at the genetics, angelfishsociety.org has a wonderful set of resources available to you. Even if you're not a member, if you're a member, if you join it, you can actually get in. They have a little genetics calculator where you can find out the specific genes and alleles that your fish have. Some of the ones that I keep track of: pearl scale. I have my albinos as well. Some of my smokies are pearl scale. This is a recessive gene. So some of my fish are carriers, and you know it if you breed them to a fish that is a carrier or has pearl scale. If you get any pearl scale, you know that they are carrier. So it's called a test cross. Albino gene, another recessive trait, so fish can carry it, or if they're albino, they have a double dose of both of those alleles. And then there are some other ones like the streak gene, which results in some striping, blushing, which a lot of my koi are a blushing type, just kind of one of those traits that kind of went along with them from the original sources that I got my fish, which came out of Dave Lasnik and Steve Rybicki's fish. And then ghost, which is a fish without any stripes, clown, which has blotches, and then there's a ton of different ones that you can go through here. But again, I recommend going to Angelfish Society, and there's a couple. When you search for Angelfish, there's a couple other good sites that will come up very quickly that will give you some good information on those. Okay. So basic requirements to make your angelfish happy, healthy. If you're familiar with most South American cichlids, if a South American cichlids, the other ones are happy, then these guys generally are going to do just well. The domesticated ones anyways are quite forgiving. Temperatures that I find work best at 78 to 82 range. Some of my, especially in the summertime, some of my tanks might creep up a little bit warmer than that. In the wintertime, they might be, the bottom tanks might be in 76 range. So, I mean, it's no one magic temperature, but definitely you want mid to upper 70s for them to be at their best. Water pH, they're not as picky on this. The wild types maybe a little bit more, but domesticated angels generally prefer to have just a little bit of acidic. I keep a lot of driftwood in most of my tanks, so that tends to bring it down a little bit because my water is basically neutral coming out of the tap. Softer, when I say soft, it doesn't have to be RO water by any stretch, especially for the domesticated ones. But even the folks living around the Lake Erie area and the Great Lakes region where water tends to be on the hard side, many people do just fine. The only issue you might have is getting the eggs to hatch. So when you set eggs, you might want to put RO water or some rainwater in with them, and that will help you out. So don't feel like you can't raise angelfish or keep them if you do have hard water. They will grow quicker. Good example of that. My brother lives in Erie, up in Girard, and he keeps, obviously he raises plenty of angels too, since we both are into them. But his water is very hard. His fish grow faster than mine. It's because my water is very soft. I basically have RO water that comes out of the tap. Beyond that, tank sizes. For an adult pair, a 20-gallon, I prefer the 20-gallon high tanks to the long, especially for the veils. Seem to work just fine. If you want to keep a decent number of angels, obviously you need to go up in size. And the tanks that are like the 55 gallons that are narrower work just fine for the angels. They like to have a lot of vertical space as compared to a lot of your other cichlids. They will move throughout the water column quite a bit. And filtration wise, you got to keep on this. So depending on whether you're breeding or raising out, you can have some different things there. But keeping good water quality will keep those fins looking beautiful. If you start getting ammonia up, you'll burn the fins and they won't look right. They'll get bends and crooks to them. So certainly good water chemistry at all times is an absolute essential. As far as diet goes, the angelfish is truly an omnivore. They will feed on algae. They feed on insects, small fish. If it fits in their mouth, they will basically eat it. So with that in mind, when I mix up my flake foods, I put a variety of things in there. So I'll buy 8 pounds of different foods, and then I mix them all together. So I throw in vegetable flake, color flake, angel flake, some worm flake, and all kinds of different, as much variety as I can. But I always make sure I have a good dose of color flake in there, especially for my koi, to make sure they're getting the right nutrients to color them up. And with that, I do supplement with some frozen and live food. So brine shrimp, I feed that every day to all my young fish twice a day. I've raised white worms, various other types of foods like that. They will certainly happily eat that and do quite well with it. So the key thing is here, throw some variety into their diet, and you're going to have a healthier, better looking fish when it comes down to it. Okay, so if you decide to make the jump and you want to get into angelfish, a couple key things to look for. If you go to some of the angelfish, like angelfish.org site, there is an actual breed standard they have for them. In general, you want to compare them back to the wild type fish. Look at a nice wild scalare, and that is really what you want to base off of. Now, the domesticated fish tend to be a little different. They're a little bit more of a rounded shape, but they should be taller than they are long, whereas a lot of the wild fish are a lot more diamond shape or like triangular in the way their bodies are put together. So you can definitely see a difference, and their faces have a different shape to them as well. Okay, so as I said, taller than long is really the big thing to go for. There shouldn't be any massive bumps on their head. As generally something that's not looked at positively with angelfish. Certain strains will get that a little bit more than others. But beyond that, I mean, if you're just raising because you like it, then that's one thing. Fins should always be nice and straight. So the fish in the picture here is a good example of that. There shouldn't be any crooks or bends to it. Those are oftentimes caused by the fish getting burned by ammonia in the water when they're young. The fins will be off kilter, and especially the veil, like the top fin, as well as the veil fins will sometimes get nipped off. But they also do, if they are in a grow out tank, they'll get nipped and stuff. So there are some things that can cause. There are certain traits that you look for, like the goofy bends and stuff, that are more of a problem. If they're just different lengths, like the veil fins, then they probably just got bit off at some point by another fish. Okay, color, no matter whether it's a silver angel or a koi, they should be a bright, healthy looking color. Pale fish, as many of us know, aren't going to do too well for you unless you get some magic working and you hit them with the right medications and they are able to pull through. But in general, you want a nice, brightly colored, true to whatever color type you're looking at, and that's really the way to go. And health-wise, angelfish are active. I mean, they're not going to be zipping all over the tank like a Corridor's catfish, but they are going to be moving around. Their eyes should be nice and alert. They should have a thick body. When you look down on them from the top of their heads, you should not see a point. It should be nice and fat and rounded all the way down through there. If you see any indentations on their stomachs and stuff like that, don't get them. They're either loaded with parasites or something bad's going on. You're not going to have them around very long. Okay, from there, as far as raising angelfish, there are some of them that will raise their babies for you, just like a good old South American cichlid. But many of our domesticated fish kind of struggle with that at times, especially in smaller tanks. I have a couple pairs. I actually have a pair of koi and a pair of smokies down in my fish room right now that would raise every single baby. The smokies actually have a batch of babies. I have a picture of them here at the end, but they take care of them. The fry will be free swimming, and they're great parents. But a lot of them, just due to the way they've been domesticated, aren't so great at raising their own fry. So I do it artificially, which I'll go through the steps of how you do that. But once you get a pair, then you can go through that process. But getting a pair, as you know, just like most things, you want to start with a group. And I always try to have at least a half a dozen fish in there. So this picture is a group of wild Peruvians and a group of kois that I was trying to get paired off together at that time. I usually try to, once they're adults, I'm not too bad at sexing them. So I have a few tricks up my sleeve to help me out. But in general, angelfish are kind of tough to sex. The ones that I've never been able to be good at are my albinos. The males and females really don't show much of a difference. The kois, they generally do. But once you get a nice group, you raise them up to adults, and eventually you'll hit the point where they start to pair off. And I have found that if you're looking to breed angelfish, letting them choose their own mates is probably going to be one of your best things you can do. I have tried to force pairs together because I have two fish that have specific traits that I really want to pair off together. And about half the time they end up just beating each other up badly, and I end up losing one of them. So, I mean, I've also had some angels, like I had a female on my fish room that she went through about 4 males over the time that I had her, because she would just randomly out of the blue just attack them and rip them apart. You would expect that out of the males more, but some of the females can be every bit as bad. But if they choose their own mate, I mean, I've had some of them that stayed together for 6, 7, 8 years and did fantastic and never fought with each other. And those pairs like that are the ones that you really hold on to, because it's not too often with any type of fish that you end up with a pair that forms that strong of a bond and just does a great job all the way through for you. Okay, but once you have them in the big tank and you have them pair off, then you want to pull them out of there. They will, one pair of angelfish will make a 125-gallon tank their own, and all the other fish will be crammed down into one little corner. So they become very territorial, and you'll end up losing fish if you allow them to keep harassing them. So I like 20 highs, but you can use bigger. You can get away with 15s maybe, but for the bales especially, a 20 high is generally going to be the best. So my typical breeding tank setup, and this is what most of my fish room looks like, 20 high. I don't put gravel in tanks. They're just, I paint them blue on all the sides except for the front. Typical sponge filter in there. So I get mine either from Swiss Tropicals or Angels Plus. Both of them have their pros and cons. Some of them I've actually made my own. So some foams I like better than others. I love my potted crypt plants. So Cryptocorum wenti. About every single aquarium has 1 or 2 pots of it in there, and a chunk of driftwood for the pleco. And as you can see, there's a couple cories in there as well with this guy. And that's really the extent of what I use for my breeding tanks. And some of these tanks, the pair will be in that, and that's their tank for the next 5 years or more. Okay. Once you get the fish to lay a batch of eggs for you, and this series of pictures was from a younger pair, so there was a slightly higher amount of eggs that didn't hatch out. I still probably got a couple hundred fry out of it, but they did have a little bit more egg loss here than what I usually get. So once the pairs lay, if it's not a pair that raises their own young, then I move them over to a 2.5-gallon tank. Again, I paint them blue, and I keep the lighting low. If you get it too bright, especially if you have albinos, the fry won't be able to find their foods. You'll damage your eyes and stuff like that. So I try to keep the light down, especially till after they're up swimming around well and they get a little bit bigger. In my 2.5-gallon tanks, I generally add 10 drops of methylene blue solution. And that gives enough that I don't get much fungus, and it's in the top rack of my fish room where I have them hatching, and that stays right around 80, 82 degrees, and voila, then they start along their process of hatching. So day one, the angel eggs, for the most part, just look like little tiny clear balls. They're stuck very tightly to the slates wherever they put them. Not a whole lot of change from day 2. Again, just you might be able to start seeing some of the embryos forming in there. The eye spots get a little darker. Day 3, the eggs start to look more oval shaped, and you will start to get a better idea that there is something actually in them. You will see the head spots and things of that nature. By about day 4, the eggs will start to drop, and they'll just be hanging there by a little bit, and you'll see them start to move in the current. Little tiny like beginnings of like a tail will start to stick out there as they are starting to hatch. Okay, after day 6, they begin to fall down, and they still have a big yolk sac, so you don't have to feed anything here whatsoever. Once they all fall off the slate, then I'll take the slate off, and any eggs that didn't hatch, you don't want them adding ammonia to your water in your hatching tank, and pull that out of there carefully and make sure all the little fry fall off. But I usually wait until after most of them are off the slate before I actually remove the slate out of the tank. From there, by day 8, you'll have free swimming fish, depending on the temperature. It might take you till day 9, or they might get moving at day 7 if you're a little bit warmer. But at the point where they get up and they start moving around, that's when you want to be concerned about them starting to eat something. Nothing before that. So a lot of people do struggle raising their babies. Getting them to hatch is generally not a big issue, but once you get them to hatch, keeping them alive for those first few days can be a little bit of a trickier thing. So when you have them out, the key thing is wait until they are free swimming. You don't have to worry about putting any bit of food in there whatsoever. You'll just end up making the water go bad and not going to have too much good come from it. So once they are free swimming, though, I start out with angelfish. Brine shrimp works perfectly fine. So I have newly hatched brine shrimp. I have 2 batches running on 24-hour cycles, and I'll feed them a small amount. And again, make sure they can clean it up. If you put too much in there, that's going to cause you to lose them very quickly. Okay. Once they have been eating for a handful of days, so a week or so, I mean, keep up on regular water changes in that little tank. But once they're eating well and you can see their bellies filling up with shrimp, then I move them to a 10-gallon tank. Just make sure there's no plecos in there or other cories or anything like that, because the plecos, believe it or not, like eating baby angels. Especially at night when the baby angels are all sitting on the bottom of the tank resting. So you'll lose a whole hatch very quickly. But once you get them into the 10-gallon tank, you're basically all set there, and they will be able to keep going. You can start putting in some finely crushed flake food and various other micro feeds, and eventually, before you know it, they'll be eating regular flake and other foods very easily. But I do keep the brine shrimp going for quite a while. The key thing is just don't crowd them, don't overfeed them. It's tricky for a lot of people, but anyone that's worked with the cichlids and angelfish are no exception. They lay a lot of eggs and you get a lot of fry. If you don't have the room to spread them out, or you aren't going to be able to sell them, don't hatch them all. So either scrape off a portion of the eggs, or once the fry hatch, only pull out what you can manage and only raise that, because you won't be doing anybody a good service if you try to raise them all and you don't have a weight and you get crowded, because the fish will end up getting ammonia burns on them, and it just isn't going to be a good situation. So if you want nice looking fish, make sure they have plenty of tank space and that you can handle the numbers that you're hatching out. Because angelfish, I mean, if I hatched every egg that came out of my fish room, it would be a pretty crazy amount of fish coming out of there, and I don't have the market to deal with that. So I hatch what I can sell. So this is basically what I use for a brine shrimp hatchery. So 2-liter bottle upside down. There's a light bulb in the bottom of it to keep them warm, and air bubbles, and voila, every 24 hours I get a batch of brine shrimp that I can feed away. Okay. As far as their diet over time, as I mentioned, the newly hatched fry, it's best to give them a steady diet of brine shrimp. They do fantastic on it. Once they get a little bit bigger and you get them in the bigger tanks, then you can start doing some flake food. I have tried using the decapsulated brine shrimp. Never had great luck with it. I don't know if I'm just feeding too much of it, but live brine shrimp seems to stimulate their feeding, and they just take off with it and grow incredibly fast. Once they get up to about that dime body size, like pea to dime body size, then you really can start working the flake in. I still keep the brine shrimp coming at them. Even at this age, they love it. It's small. They're small enough that they can eat it easily. And from there, Once you get up to that nickel body size to quarter body size, I start working in. I feed Purina Aquamax fry starter crumbles. I buy them by the 50-pound bags and package them down. So I go through a lot of food with all my fish. So works out well. Bag of that's like usually 80 or 90 bucks. I just ordered one, so I'll find out what it went up to here this year. But that seems to, I do that once a day, flake mix. And I love Cobalt. So the Cobalt guys will probably like the free advertisement here. But if you're looking for a good color flake, and you keep it small, it is going to cost you a little bit more, but the Cobalt foods do a fantastic job. I also have good luck with the flake foods and such from Angels Plus as well as Ken's Fish. Both of those are commonly foods that I feed, but I do mix a lot of my flakes together to give a good mix there. So it's not just one provider that I use. Okay, from there, again, once they hit that nickel to quarter size, you can start working in all the other things like white worms and blood worms. And from time to time, I'll make up my own beef heart mix, which the fish tend to like. I've kind of gotten into the Raplashy stuff lately, the gel food. And again, the fish love that. So biggest thing is there's no one miracle food for the angelfish, but variety. Don't just give them one tiny little jar of flake food and call that good. Some of them might be okay, but the more variety you're going to put in there, the healthier and longer your fish are going to live. All right, once you get a nice big hatch, I have a whole bunch of 55-gallon tanks that I run, 75-gallon tanks and 90s that I can split my fry out into. And if you have good filters, you can fit a lot of fish into a 55-gallon tank. So I mean, times I'll have 200 dime size angels in a 55-gallon tank, but I keep the big HM like Hamburg Matten filters in my grow out tanks, at least 3-inch thick. Some of them have 2-inch filters, one on each side. The 5-inch ones from Swiss Tropicals, I definitely the 5-inch filters from Swiss Tropicals are by far one of my favorite filters for my 20-gallon tanks, and even throwing them in my grow out tanks just for some extra aeration and filtration. But those ones do excellent. They're not too big, but they're big enough you get a lot of biofiltration out of them. But the HMF filters cannot be beat for the amount of fish you can keep into a tank. And you can get the foam for those from both Swiss Tropicals, which we always see at the convention, but also Angels Plus deals in that as well. The foams are a little bit different from each other, but both of them work fantastic, and I have assortment of both of them in my tanks. But as like the inch per gallon rule, I mean, it really depends on your filtration. Keeping the more spread out they're going to be, the faster they'll grow, the healthier the fish are going to be. You crowd them, you start having problems. Feed them good foods throughout the duration of their life. Water changes, I mean, this is where the work comes in, especially for people like me that don't have a master system where the chains, you can do like water changes automatically. I have to go through and siphon my tanks. So I nav it all down to where it doesn't take me a lot of time, but it is quite a few hours that I spend in there every week, which I don't mind because I enjoy it. But if you let the water quality go, you can lose a whole tank of baby angels very quickly if you let the water quality diminish. And just like anything, when you have 300-400 babies coming out of a hatch, there's probably going to be some that just don't grow as well as others. Especially if you're line breeding fish and the traits are close, you're probably going to have some goofy fins or something like that. Get rid of them. I have a beautiful green terror in my fish room now that loves taking care of those fish for me. But some good source, if you always wanted to keep that big fish in your room, that's a good place to get rid of all those culls that we all end up with at some point in time or the other. And if you're hatching out hundreds and hundreds of fish, you're going to get enough of them to keep one of those big fish happy. Okay, from there, for people like myself, if you really get into angelfish and you want to maintain your own line, you got to keep quite a few fish. But the key thing is don't breed them close. You really want to avoid breeding siblings to siblings. And this is a problem that we've run into with a lot of the fish available in the aquarium trade is people get down by a group and they probably all came out of the same hatch, and that's the ones that they pair up together. You can get away with it for a while, but eventually you're going to start concentrating those recessive alleles that are not good for any type of organism, and you'll start having more of those deformities show up. Certain traits will be something that bent fins and things of that nature will show up quite regularly. So I always try to, when I set up pairs, try to make sure that they're distantly related if they are. Regularly, every few, like handful of generations, working in some out blood of some sort. So this is something I've been starting to think about doing again with my koi strains. I have a couple places I typically go for them. So whether it's back to the guys at Angels Plus, or I'm kind of been kicking around the idea of trying to get some wild angels, but right now it's been kind of tough to find a lot of those imported fish since things are a little disrupted. But working those other sources of genetics in there to keep your gene pool nice and deep so you don't have problems and you have stronger, faster growing fish with more true characteristics, you're going to be better off. But you do have to pay attention to that and keep them, keep aware of like what fish you're pairing up, or else you're going to have some problems. Okay. With angelfish, though, if you plan on raising a bunch of them, you got to figure out somewhere to get rid of them. And right now, with all the auctions being mostly shut down and such, it's a little bit more challenging. I do a lot of sales on Aquabid in the summer, especially. Typically, conventions, auctions throughout the region, I can get rid of a lot of fish. I mean, spring and fall, there's tons of them throughout our area, especially if you're willing to drive 5-6 hours. You can go somewhere every weekend in the spring and in the fall, which is fantastic for this area. I mean, the PA, New York, Ohio area is absolutely amazing for the number of auctions and stuff, and good auctions. I mean, you're generally not going to give stuff away at most of them. I do typically deal with just one pet shop, Ellicottville Aquatics in near Salamanca, New York. So give them a shout out. They've been good to me over the past couple of years here, and that's actually the only pet shop that I deal with on a regular basis. And just over the years, I've picked up a variety of customers that every year I'm shipping fish to them. If you've never shipped fish, it's something that I highly recommend you give it a go. It does take a little bit of practice, but if anyone ever wants to get a little bit of help, find somebody that does it. I mean, I'm more than happy to give you a rundown on what I do, but it's one of those things that you just kind of got to get a feel for it. And eventually, I mean, I've shipped probably by this point in time, a good 1,500 or, maybe even more than that, boxes of fish over the years, and had very few problems with any of them. Most of the issues were caused by the shippers and not so much what I did. But also, this year I had planned on trying to do some sales on eBay, but that just never worked out as much. So if you do get into shipping, some basic things, and with the angelfish, this is something that I really pay attention to, but fasting them, make sure that you have good water going in there, insulated boxes. And I always assume this week, almost all my boxes got delayed that went out to the West Coast. So I still have one waiting, so it'll be on day 4 tomorrow. But if you pack them well, they can handle 4 or 5. I've had angels take up to 8 days in flat rate boxes and be just fine. So with that said, if there's any other questions? So I mentioned that I do have a pair of smokies that happily raise their own fry. This is a chocolate one, but a smoky type. And then he's with a regular smoky, and those are their fry that are all over the leaves of the plant. They hatched them on a slate and they moved them to the plant. And every time I go near them, they attack me through the glass. But they're fantastic parents. I mean, 2 fish that would raise every baby if they could. So that's it. I will close out here so I can see the chat. If there's any questions, I will answer.
There was only one question in the chat, and that was already answered about what do people mean when they say not real or not true ultims?
Yeah.
Or
yeah, I mean, the true ultims that come out of the Amazon, they're huge, beautiful fish. You really can't mistake them for anything else. So get back to my screen here. But the true ultims, I mean, you put them in a 55-gallon tank, their fins will stretch from top to bottom. I mean, they should be absolutely stunning fish, which is one of the reasons why I've never really messed with them, because they do take up quite a bit of room. So, I mean, captivity, most people have found the ultims generally are a lot harder to keep alive. They tend to stress out, and breeding them in captivity, especially in aquariums, is kind of tough. I mean, I think some of the ones that came into the trade eventually, they bred them in ponds or larger areas. So that was kind of the deal with them. But the other types of wild angels, they generally do a great job. You can eat any of the wild types. Some of them are a little more skittish than others, but as long as you have them in a nice tank with a lot of plants, they will calm down eventually, and you can get them to pair up. But getting them to pair up with a domestic angel can be a little tricky, but that's, just got to be patient with them and find the right fish. And sometimes it's not the one you want it to pick, but as long as you get moving in the right directions, generally it's okay.
The other question someone just asked is they're curious what your seller name was on Aquabid.
Okay, I sell under HUBS RKB, so Hubs RKB.
Okay.
And I do a lot more selling on there. Like, a lot of people confuse my brother and I quite a bit because we do both raise koi angels, and we keep a lot. I mean, our lines are related to each other. I mean, we share fish on occasion and stuff. So, but both of us, sell on there. I do want more on Aquabid in the summer because, well, I teach and that's my summer job, and well, he has to work in summer, so he's a little bit busier in the summer. So the rest of the year is when he's a little quieter. But
does Aquabid does it take a percentage off your sale?
They do not force you to, so it is like a contributions requested. So every once in a while, I'll tally them up and send a little money Mark Barnett's way to make it good, because I do appreciate the site. Now, if you sell on eBay, you're going to sell. They'll take a percentage off of there, but yeah. So it's one that I just haven't gotten into yet.
And what does it usually cost for you with shipping? Like what's it cost an average person to ship across the United States?
It depends on where they live. My preferred method is UPS, and if a person is within 2 days UPS ground service, usually it's right around $20 for me to ship a box of fish to anywhere south to Florida. Florida falls into the 3-day range, so it does get a little more pricey. You get far south, it goes up to about $30 for one of my boxes. And I can usually get about west to the Mississippi, and that's my happy place. I mean, I can go all the way up through New England and stuff, and it's usually $20 to $30 for a big, like 12-inch cube box is the main one I use. West Coast, which I ship a lot of fish to California every year, and I like to use the flat rate boxes. That's the cheapest, most economical way, but the Postal Service has been absolutely terrible this year. Especially like this week, as I said, my boxes are all delayed, like right from the get-go. They all sat in Pittsburgh for an extra day before they moved anywhere. So that's, the trickier part. I mean, most years the Postal Service is phenomenal for me. When I ship to Florida or ship to California, which is 2 places I send a lot of stuff, they usually get there 2 to 3 days, no problem. But this year it seems to be doing more 4 or 5 on a regular basis.
And then there was another question online asking, how do you sex angel fish?
Okay. I guess I had meant to talk about that a little bit more, but in general, the males, when you look at them from straight on, like when they're facing you, the chest is going to have a flat angle to it, and they tend to have a much more compressed, like their body's not going to be like a straight, smooth shot all the way back. You're not going to see like any bulges. Now, like when the female gets mature, they will kind of like it's a healthy look to them, but the back in their abdomen area, you'll see a bulge out, and that's where their eggs are. So when they're full of eggs, it's easy to tell. And also their chests tend to be more rounded as compared to squared off and angular like you see with the males. Other than that, I can usually, if they're like getting mature, I can just watch their behavior, because I've seen thousands of angelfish, and I can usually do a pretty good job of picking it out. But like I said, my albinos, I've given up. I mean, I'll just put a group of adults together until I see them pair off and lay together. I don't have a shot at it, because they both look almost identical for whatever reason. But wild type angels and like my koi and stuff, they're usually pretty easy once they're adults, but young fish, it's not easy.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, I don't think there was one more question, but it looks like someone already answered it in the chat for him. So, unless you have another opinion on it, why is it better to try breeding in bare bottom tanks?
For me, it is nothing to do. I mean, if you want to have gravel, go for it. But my 50-some tanks take a lot of time to clean. And when I can just take a big 1-inch hose and use it as my siphon, it's really just comes down to ease of care. If you want, like having gravel in tanks, great. I mean, I've bred angels in tanks with gravel and stuff, and it works out just fine. But it's just really comes down to keeping the tanks clean. Now, like the one thing I do work into my tanks, I'm like kind of the oddball for this whole region. I actually put in all my pots, they're filled with limestone chips. And that helps my fish out a lot, because if when I first bought my house, I couldn't keep plecos alive because the water is so soft. There's like literally nothing in it. So by putting either crushed coral or some limestone in there, that helped me out a great deal. So again, knowing your water chemistry, you might need to have the gravel. Like with the Africans, you need it to help keep the pH up. Whereas angelfish being around neutral or even acidic is perfectly fine or preferred. All right.
Makes sense. Well, I think that's all we have for questions. Well, that was an excellent job there and talk on angelfish. Really informative, and I think a lot of people learned quite a bit. And we appreciate you taking your time to be here with us and talk about this.
I appreciate you having me.
So we'll close off the broadcast now, and this will be live if you didn't catch it. I mean, it'll be on YouTube and Facebook if you want to watch it. If you didn't catch the beginning and you tuned in late, or if you want to share with others who want to know more about angelfish. And it's great to have have so many experts in the OCA. So thanks so much for being a part of this again.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Well, you guys have a great night, and we look forward to seeing you in September.
All right. That's it.
And it is off, I think. There we go. So what'd you think of that?
Worked out fine. So I kept an eye on time, so I wasn't sure exactly where I'd finish up, but like we're not too bad. So
yeah, I thought it was great. I mean, like if we keep it at an hour, I think that's what people have like, attention span for.
Yeah.
And yeah, I thought yeah, that was great. Perfect. I was trying to figure out how I could like maybe chime in a little bit, but with like some comments, but I mean, it seemed like people were just really intent listening, and then you know what? It says we're still on.
Yeah.
I hit end. That's awesome.
There you go.
We'll try one more time. It's not closing out. Let me, we'll do this the old fashioned way and just remove ourselves, okay?
Okay.
I don't know what's going on, but all right.